When I returned to my granddaughter's 15th birthday, I found a banner that read, "Go away, you old resentful woman." I brought with me a gift that would reveal her true story. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. Chapter 1. The Cold Reception. The April afternoon sun warmed my back as I walked toward the country club, clutching my purse tightly against my side. Inside was a small, neatly wrapped package, something I'd been saving for this day. At 65, I'd learned to treasure moments of connection, especially with family. Today was my granddaughter Camila's 15th birthday, and despite our complicated history, I'd convinced myself that this milestone might be a chance for reconciliation. I smoothed down my blue dress, purchased specially for the occasion, and took a steadying breath before pulling open the heavy glass door. The reception hall was transformed with pink and silver decorations, a DJ setting up in the corner, and waiters gliding between clusters of guests with trays of appetizers. I scanned the room for familiar faces, my heartbeat quickening when I spotted my son Eduardo in deep conversation with his wife Claudia. They hadn't noticed me yet. My fingers brushed against the small package in my purse. Perhaps today would be different. Then I saw it. Hanging above the gift table was a banner, with carefully painted letters, "Go away, you old resentful woman." I froze, blood rushing to my face as several nearby guests turned to stare. The banner was positioned where everyone would see it, and see me reading it. This wasn't an oversight or a teenager's prank. This was deliberate humiliation. Mother. Eduardo's voice cut through my shock. He stood a few feet away, arms crossed, his expression hard. "I'm surprised you actually came." "It's my granddaughter's birthday," I managed, my voice barely steady. "Of course I came." Claudia appeared at his side, her smile sharp as a knife. "We were quite clear about the family's wishes, Isabella. Especially after what you did." "What?" "I did." The same old accusations, twisted so far from truth I barely recognized them anymore. In their version, I had abandoned the family out of bitterness after Roberto died. In reality, I had discovered financial irregularities in the family vineyard, confronted Eduardo, and was systematically pushed out and painted as unstable. "I just want to wish Camila a happy birthday," I said, straightening my shoulders. "I brought her a gift." "A gift?" Claudia's laugh was brittle. "More like another attempt to poison her against us. She doesn't need your gifts or your stories." I looked past them, searching for my granddaughter. She stood across the room, surrounded by friends, beautiful in a flowing pink dress that made her look older than her 15 years. When our eyes met, her expression changed, not to warmth, but to something harder, rehearsed. She excused herself from her friends and walked over, each step deliberate. "Grandma," she said, the word sounding foreign on her lips. "Happy birthday, Camila," I said, the words catching in my throat. "You look beautiful. Why are you here?" Her voice was cool, distant. "You abandoned us, and now you show up pretending to care?" The words struck me like physical blows. This wasn't my granddaughter speaking. These were Claudia's accusations, planted and nurtured over years. "That's not what happened, Camila. I never—" "Save it," she interrupted, her young face twisted with an anger that didn't belong to her. "Mom and Dad told me everything. How after Grandpa died, you just walked away because you couldn't stand seeing Dad take over the business. How you've been bitter and resentful ever since." Several guests were watching now, the spectacle of family drama more enticing than the canapes. "Please, Camila," I said quietly. "That's not the truth." "Just go," she said, her voice rising. "You're ruining my party, just like you tried to ruin everything else." Eduardo placed his hand on Camila's shoulder, the gesture both protective and possessive. "You heard her, Mother. I think it's best if you leave." I stood there, surrounded by family yet completely alone, the small package weighing heavily in my purse. The gift I'd brought, the truth I'd carried for so long, suddenly seemed pointless. What good would it do now, in this hostile territory? "I'm sorry," I whispered, though I wasn't sure who I was apologizing to. Camila, for the lies she'd been told, or myself, for believing this day might be different. I turned and walked out, my steps measured and dignified despite the tears threatening to spill. Behind me, I heard laughter resume, music starting up, the party continuing as if I'd never been there at all. In my car, hands shaking on the steering wheel, I wondered if I should simply disappear from their lives forever. Would that be easier for everyone? Or would the truth I carried die with me, leaving only their twisted version behind? I glanced at my purse, thinking of what lay inside, evidence that could change everything. But at what cost? My small apartment welcomed me with silence as I closed the door behind me. I slipped off my shoes, the blue dress I'd so carefully chosen now feeling like a costume, a pathetic attempt to play a role in a family that had written me out of their story. I sank into my worn armchair by the window, staring at the fading, evening light. My fingers trembled as I reached into my purse, pulling out the small package I'd never had the chance to give Camila. I placed it on the side table, unable to look at it. "You old resentful woman," I whispered, Claudia's words echoing in my head. How easily they'd twisted everything, turning me into the villain of their narrative. The framed photo of Roberto on the bookshelf caught my eye. His kind smile, the laugh lines around his eyes, the gray just beginning to touch his temples before cancer took him 10 years ago. Everything had changed after his death. "They've poisoned her against me, Roberto," I said to the empty room. "Our own granddaughter." Memories washed over me like a tide, pulling me back to those first devastating months after Roberto's death. Eduardo had immediately stepped in to run the vineyard, though Roberto had always intended us to manage it together until I was ready to retire. At first, I was grateful. Grief had hollowed me out and the business details were overwhelming. But when I started to recover and return to my role, I found doors that had once been open now subtly closed. Financial reports became vague. Bored. Meetings were rescheduled without notifying me. Staff who had worked with us for decades began treating me differently, their eyes sliding away when I asked direct questions. "You should rest, Mother," Eduardo would say, his concern so convincing I almost believed it. "The stress isn't good for you." Then came the discrepancies. Wine shipments that didn't match our inventory, profits that didn't align with sales figures, new equipment purchased at inflated prices from companies I'd never heard of. I remember the night I finally confronted Eduardo in his office, presenting the evidence I'd gathered. He'd looked at me with pity, as if I were a child who didn't understand. "Basic mathematics. These are complex business matters," he'd explained slowly. "Dad protected you from the complicated parts. These numbers look suspicious to you because you don't understand modern vineyard management." "I ran this business with your father for 30 years, I'd replied, my voice tight. "I understand it perfectly." His expression had hardened then. "Perhaps grief is affecting your judgment more than you realize." That was when Claudia began her campaign. Subtle at first. Concerned glances, whispered conversations that stopped when I entered a room. Then more overt. Suggestions to family members that I was struggling, that age and grief had made me paranoid. Unstable. The isolation was gradual but effective. Family dinners where I was never quite included in the conversation. Grandchildren's events I learned about after they happened. "Oh, we thought you weren't feeling well enough to come," they'd say, false concern dripping from every word. The final blow came during a family gathering when I overheard Claudia in the kitchen. "We're all worried about Isabella," she'd said, to my sister-in-law. Eduardo had to remove her from the vineyard's accounts. She was making accusations, seeing conspiracy theories everywhere. The doctor says it might be early signs of dementia. There was no doctor. There were no concerns about my mental health, except the ones they fabricated. I confronted them both that night, my anger finally breaking through months of careful restraint. Eduardo had shaken his head sadly, as if my outburst proved their point. "See?" Claudia had murmured. "This is exactly what we've been worried about." I left the vineyard that night, my dignity the only thing I managed to save. They'd taken everything else, my role in the business Roberto and I built, my relationship with the grandchildren, my reputation in the community, rather than fight, and risk being legally declared incompetent, a threat Eduardo had implied more than once. I retreated. I told myself it was temporary, that eventually the truth would surface. I never imagined that temporary would stretch into years of estrangement, or that they would construct an entirely new narrative where I had abandoned them out of spite. Tears slid down my cheek as I returned to the present, my silent apartment a testament to how effectively they'd isolated me. I wiped it away angrily. I was tired of tears. My gaze fell again on the small package on the side table. Inside was an envelope containing a letter, Roberto's last letter, and a sapphire brooch that had belonged to my grandmother. The letter revealed truths that could shatter Eduardo and Claudia's carefully constructed world, truths Roberto had wanted me to know, but had hoped we'd never need to use. Was I wrong to keep it hidden all this time? I asked Roberto's photograph. Was I wrong to protect him, even after everything he's done? The package seemed to pulse with dangerous potential. Using it would mean crossing a line I'd been unwilling to cross for years. But seeing Camila today, watching how they'd turned her against me with their lies, had awakened something fierce and desperate inside me. Perhaps it was time for the truth, no matter how painful. 3 weeks passed after the birthday disaster. I tried to put the humiliation behind me, falling into my quiet routine, volunteering at the community center on Tuesdays and Thursdays, tending to my small balcony garden, meeting my friend Beatrice for coffee on Sunday afternoons. Simple pleasures that filled my days but couldn't quite fill the hollow space where family should have been. I was browsing at Landry's Antiques, a small shop I'd frequented for years, searching for a vintage teacup to replace one I'd broken. The shop was a comforting maze of treasures, furniture with stories to tell, jewelry from bygone eras, old photographs of strangers' happy moments. I was examining a delicate porcelain cup when a voice behind me sent a jolt through my body. "Grandma?" I turned slowly, hardly daring to believe it. Camila stood a few feet away, wearing jeans and a simple sweater, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. So different from the princess-like girl at the party. Her expression wasn't hostile, merely cautious. "Camila," I managed, setting down the teacup before my trembling hands could drop it. "What are you doing here?" She shifted her weight from one foot to the other. "School project. We're supposed to find an object that represents our family history and write about it." Her voice was flat, rehearsed. "Mom suggested I check antique stores." Of course Claudia would send her to a store rather than look through family heirlooms. Many of which were in boxes in my apartment, pieces of history they'd discarded along with me. "That sounds like an interesting project," I said carefully, afraid that showing too much enthusiasm might send her retreating. She shrugged. "I guess. I don't know what I'm looking for." The silence between us stretched uncomfortably. I desperately wanted to suggest the many family items I had: Roberto's pocket watch, my mother's silver hand mirror, photographs dating back 3 generations, but I didn't dare. "What kind of history are you hoping to showcase?" I asked instead. Camila ran her finger along the edge of a nearby table. "Something about where we came from, I guess. Dad says our family built everything from nothing, but..." She hesitated, glancing up at me. "Some of the old photographs at home show a lot more than nothing." A small flame of hope flickered in my chest. She was questioning the narrative, even if just slightly. "Your great-grandparents came from Spain in 1935, I said, keeping my voice even. "They brought very little with them, but they did bring knowledge about winemaking and incredible determination. Camila looked at me directly for the first time. You know a lot about them? I do, I said simply. I have albums, letters, even some small items they brought with them. She bit her lip, conflict clear on her young face. Dad doesn't talk much about the past. The past can be complicated, I offered, careful not to sound critical of Eduardo. Sometimes it's easier to focus on the present. She nodded, then glanced at her watch. I should go. My friend's mom is picking me up soon. Of course, I said, trying to hide my disappointment. It was nice seeing you, Camila. She turned to leave, then paused. Do you really have things from our family history? Yes, I said, my heart pounding. Photographs, letters, small keepsakes. You're welcome to see them sometime if you'd our fura. Like? She hesitated, then pulled out her phone. What's your number? For the project, I mean. My fingers fumbled as I recited my number, hardly daring to believe this small opening. She typed it in, then gave a short nod. I'll think about it, she said, then walked quickly out of the shop. I stood frozen, afraid to move as if it might break the spell of what had just happened. After so long, a tiny bridge had formed. That evening, I told Beatriz about the encounter over tea in my apartment. The envelope with Roberto's letter sat in my desk drawer, as it had for years. This might be your chance, Isabella, Beatriz said, her eyes bright with hope for me. To rebuild something with your granddaughter. Or it might be nothing, I cautioned. She might never call. Or worse, she might tell Claudia and Eduardo about seeing me, and they'll make sure it never happens again. Beatrice set down her teacup firmly. Stop. You can't control what they do, but you can decide how you respond to this opportunity. I have things I could tell her, I said quietly, thinking of the envelope. Truths that would change how she sees everything. No, Beatrice said sharply. That's not how you start. You don't begin rebuilding with dynamite, Isabella. She was right, of course. The secrets I held were powerful. Explosive even. Using them to win Camila over would make me no better than Claudia and her manipulations. Start with the simple things, Beatrice advised. Family stories, small traditions. Give her space to form her own opinions. I nodded, knowing she was right. If Camila reached out, I would need to tread carefully, building trust slowly rather than trying to demolish her parents' narrative in one dramatic revelation. My phone chimed with a text message. Unknown number. Hi, Grandma. This is Camila. Dundee. I come see those family photos sometime? For my project. I showed the message to Beatriz, my hand shaking slightly. See? She said, squeezing my arm. A bridge. Small, but real. I typed my reply carefully. I'd love that, Camila. You're welcome. Anytime. As I pressed send, I glanced at the drawer containing Roberto's letter. The truth would have its moment, but not yet. First, there needed to be trust. First, there needed to be a relationship to withstand the weight of the past. Camila came to my apartment the following Saturday afternoon. I spent the morning in nervous preparation, arranging photo albums on the coffee table, baking her favorite lemon cookies, hoping her tastes hadn't changed, and tidying my already neat living room. When the doorbell rang, my heart leapt to my throat. She stood in the hallway, backpack slung over one shoulder, looking both curious and wary. Hi, she said simply. Come in, I responded, stepping aside. I'm so glad you came. She entered cautiously, eyes scanning my small home. I wondered what she saw, a stranger's apartment or echoes of the grandmother she barely remembered. It's nice, she said finally, setting her backpack down. Smaller than I expected. I don't need much space these days, I replied, leading her to the living room where the albums waited. Would you like some lemon cookies? I baked them this morning. A flash of recognition crossed her face. You used to make those when I was little. It wasn't a question, but a sudden memory. Every Sunday, I confirmed. You would sit on a stool at the counter and help me squeeze the lemons. She nodded slowly, then gestured to the albums. Are those the family photos? I sat beside her on the sofa, leaving comfortable space between us, and opened the oldest album. This one starts with your great-great-grandparents in Spain, before they came to America. For the next hour, we paged through history. Sepia-toned photographs of stern-faced ancestors standing before the original vineyard in Catalonia. The ship manifest from their journey to America. The first small plot of land they purchased in California. Camila took notes occasionally, asking thoughtful questions. When we reached photos of her father as a young boy, she lingered, studying Eduardo's childhood face. Dad never shows me old pictures, she said quietly. I chose my words carefully. Some people find it easier to focus on the future than the past. Or maybe they're hiding something, she muttered. I pretended not to hear, turning to the next page where Roberto and I stood proudly before our expanded vineyard, Eduardo, a teenager beside us. That's when we grew from 20 acres to 50, I explained. Your grandfather had such vision for what the vineyard could become. Dad says he built the business to what it is today, Camila said, watching my reaction. That Grandpa Roberto was too cautious, too old-fashioned. I kept my expression neutral despite the sting. Your grandfather was prudent, yes. He believed in sustainable growth, in knowing the land intimately before expanding. Your father brought modern approaches that helped the business grow more quickly. But it was already successful before, wasn't it? These photos don't look like a struggling business. Her perception surprised me. Yes, it was successful. Different, but successful. We continued through the albums until we reached Camila's early childhood. Photos of her toddler self in my arms, making cookies in my kitchen, sitting on Roberto's shoulders among the grapevines. I don't remember any of this, she whispered. You were very young when things changed, I said gently. She looked up at me, her eyes suddenly direct. Why did you leave us? The question I'd been dreading, yet needing to hear. I didn't leave you, Camila. I was pushed away. She frowned. Mom and Dad said you couldn't stand that Dad was in charge after Grandpa died, that you were bitter and interfering. I took a deep breath. After your grandfather died, I found some concerning issues with the vineyard's finances. When I brought them to your father's attention, he and your mother began suggesting I was confused, even unstable. Eventually, I was excluded from everything. Business decisions, family gatherings, your life. Her expression was skeptical. That's not what they told me. I imagine it isn't, I said quietly. But these albums show a different story, don't they? Would I have left willingly if I loved you all so much? She stared at a photo of herself at age 5, sitting on my lap at Christmas. I don't know what to believe. I don't expect you to take my word over theirs, I said. But I hope you'll consider that there might be another side to the story. She nodded slowly, then reached for her phone as it buzzed with a text. Her expression changed instantly. I have to go. My mom's wondering where I am. Did you tell her you were coming here? I asked, already knowing the answer. No, she admitted, gathering her things hastily. I said I was at the library for my project. I helped her pack the notes she'd taken, my heart heavy with the knowledge that our time together had been built on deception. Necessary, perhaps, but deception nonetheless. Can I come back? She asked at the door, surprising me. There's still a lot I don't know. Any time, I said, fighting the urge to hug her. My door is always open to you. After she left, I sat alone with the albums spread around me, ghosts of happier times. I'd been careful, sharing memories without accusations, letting the photographs tell their own story. But would it be enough to counter years of poisonous narrative? My answer came 3 days later when my doorbell rang urgently at 7:30 p.m. I opened it to find a red-faced Eduardo, with a tearful Claudia behind him. "Mother," he said, his voice tight with controlled rage, "we need to talk about your manipulation of our daughter." "I haven't manipulated anyone," I replied calmly, though my heart raced. "Camila came to me for help with a school project about family history." "A project?" Claudia scoffed. "Is that what you're calling it?" She came home asking questions about why we don't have old photos of the vineyard, why we never talk about the past. Eduardo stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Stay away from her. Whatever game you're playing, it stops now." "It's not a game. To want a relationship with my granddaughter," I said, meeting his gaze. "And it wasn't a game when you pushed me out of the business your father and I built." His expression hardened. "You're still the same bitter old woman, aren't you? Clinging to grievances, making up conspiracies." For a moment, I considered retrieving Roberto's letter from my desk, ending this charade once and for all. But Camila's face flashed in my mind. This wasn't the time. Not yet. "If Camila doesn't want to see me, I'll respect that," I said quietly. "But if she reaches out, I won't turn her away." Eduardo's jaw tightened. "We've forbidden her to contact you. If you approach her again, we'll take legal action." They left without another word, the threat hanging in the air between us. That night, as I lay awake replaying the confrontation, my phone lit up with a text. "They took my phone, but I'm using my friend's. They're so angry about me seeing you. Dad said terrible things. I don't understand why they hate you so much. I need to know the truth. Can we still talk somehow?" I stared at the message, torn between hope and fear. The bridge hadn't collapsed under pressure. It had somehow grown stronger. But crossing it now carried real risks for both of us. For 2 weeks, Camila and I maintained our secret communication. She would borrow friends' phones to text me, and we arranged to meet at the public library where she could legitimately be for her school project. Each time, I brought more photographs, more stories, more pieces of her heritage that had been kept from her. I was careful never to speak ill of Eduardo or Claudia, letting Camila form her own impressions as inconsistencies in their narrative became apparent. She was bright, perceptive, asking questions that revealed she was assembling her own version of the truth, piece by careful piece. "There's something they're not telling me," she said during our 4th meeting, frustration edging. Her voice, "Dad gets so angry whenever I mention your name, it's not normal." I nodded, maintaining my composure though my heart ached for her confusion. Family dynamics can be complicated, especially after conflict. "It's more than that," she insisted. "Last night I heard them arguing about you. Mom said, 'What if she tells Camila everything?'" What does that even mean? What everything? I felt the weight of Roberto's letter press against my conscience. Still, I hesitated. "Sometimes adults carry secrets they think protect their children," I said carefully. "Or themselves." Camila studied my face. "You know something too, don't you? Something you haven't told me." Before I could formulate a response that wasn't a lie but wouldn't reveal too much, my phone rang, Eduardo's number flashing on the screen. My stomach dropped. "It's your father," I told Camila, who paled visibly. "Don't answer it," she whispered. "Please." But the call was immediately followed by a text. "We know Camila is with you. If you don't bring her home immediately, we're calling the police." I showed Camila the message, watching fear replace defiance in her eyes. "How did they know?" she asked, gathering her things hastily. "They probably tracked your friend's phone," I said, helping her pack the photo albums. "Camila, I don't want to cause problems for you." "It's not fair," she said, voice cracking. "Why can't I know my own grandmother? Why are they so determined to keep us apart?" The question hung between us, the answer locked in my desk drawer at home. I made a decision then, perhaps impulsive, perhaps overdue. "Come home with me for a moment," I said quietly. "Before I take you back, there's something you should see." 10 minutes later, we stood in my apartment, the urgency of our situation, making the air feel charged. I went directly to my desk, unlocking the drawer where I'd kept Roberto's final gift for so many years. "What's that?" Camila asked as I removed the small package. "Something your grandfather wanted you to have someday," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I've been keeping it safe until the time was right." I unwrapped the package carefully, revealing an envelope yellowed with age and a small box containing the sapphire brooch. Camila reached for the jewelry first, her eyes widening. At the deep blue stone set in intricate silver. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It belonged to my grandmother, then to me, and was meant for your aunt, my daughter Elena. But she died before she could receive it." I took a deep breath. "Your grandfather wanted it to go to you when you were old enough." Camila looked up, sharply. "I was supposed to have this, but Dad told me all the family jewelry went missing after Grandpa died." "Nothing went missing," I said quietly. "This is only part of what your grandfather left for you." I handed her the envelope, watching as she carefully broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. Her hands trembled slightly as she began to read Roberto's distinctive handwriting. "My dearest Isabella," she read aloud, her voice faltering. "If you're reading this, I've left you alone to face what's coming. I'm sorry for that burden. I've seen the changes in Eduardo these past years, the ambition consuming him, the influence Claudia has over him. I fear once I'm gone, he'll try to take everything we've built together." She paused, looking up at me with shock before continuing. "I've secured copies of all business documents in the safe deposit box you know about. Use them if needed to protect yourself. But there's a harder truth I've kept from both of us for too long." Camila's voice dropped to a whisper as she read the next lines. "Eduardo is not our biological son. Your sister Maria left him with us when he was 3 months old as she battled her addictions. We took him in, loved him as our own, and never spoke of it again after Maria died. No one else knows. I never wanted him to feel unwanted, but I see now that bloodlines matter to him in ways I never anticipated. Perhaps if he knew the truth, he might understand that what matters is the love we give, not the blood we share." Tears streamed down Camila's face as she finished the letter. "But that means my dad isn't really." "He is your father," I said firmly. "And he was our son in every way that matters. Roberto and I loved him completely. Then why keep this secret? Why tell me now?" I sat beside her, choosing my words carefully. "We kept it because we loved him and didn't want him to feel different. I'm telling you now because you deserve to know your true history, and because I can't bear to see you manipulated with lies about who I am or why I left." Camila stared at the letter, then at the brooch, piecing together implications with remarkable clarity for someone so young. "Dad doesn't know, does he? That he was adopted?" I shook my head. "Your grandfather and I agreed never to tell him unless absolutely necessary. We wanted him to feel secure in his identity, in his place in our family." She looked up at me, her expression shifting from shock to something harder to read. "And you think this is absolutely necessary now? Telling me something that would devastate him if he knew?" The question struck me like a physical blow. Had I made a terrible mistake? "I just want you to understand that the story they've told you about me, about why I left, isn't true," I said, my certainty wavering. "I never abandoned this family. I was pushed out because I questioned things I wasn't supposed to question." Before Camila could respond, her phone buzzed repeatedly, Eduardo calling again and again. "I have to go," she said, carefully folding the letter and returning it to the envelope. "They're going to be furious." "Keep the letter and the brooch," I told her. "They belong to you now." She hesitated, then slipped both into her backpack. At the door, she turned to me, her young face solemn with the weight of what she now carried. "I don't know what to do with this," she admitted. "You don't have to do anything," I assured her. "The truth doesn't demand action. It just wants to be known." As I watched her walk to my car for the tense drive back to her parents' house, I wondered if I had just made the greatest mistake of my life, or finally set right a wrong that had festered for too many years. The drive to Eduardo and Claudia's house was silent, the weight of Roberto's letter hanging between Camila and me. I parked at the curb, dreading the confrontation to come. "Do you want me to go in with you?" I asked, turning to her. She clutched her backpack tightly, the hidden contents now a burden as much as a gift. "I think I need to do this myself." "Camila," I said softly, "you don't have to tell them about the letter. Not today. Not ever if you don't want to." She looked at me, her young eyes suddenly old with understanding. "Keeping secrets is what broke this family apart. I don't want to be part of that anymore." Before I could respond, the front door flew open. Eduardo strode out, his face a storm cloud of fury. Claudia hovered in the doorway, arms crossed tightly, across her chest. I squeezed Camila's hand once before she stepped out of the car. Eduardo reached her in seconds, gripping her arm and speaking in low, angry tones I couldn't hear. She pulled away, standing her ground with a poise that made my heart swell with pride despite my fear for her. I should have driven away. That would have been the prudent thing, the safe thing. Instead, I turned off the engine and stepped out onto the sidewalk. "Let go of her, Eduardo," I called, my voice steadier than I felt. He turned to me, eyes blazing. "Haven't you done enough damage? Stay out of this, Mother. If you're going to be angry with someone, be angry with me," I said, walking closer. "Not with Camila. She was only trying to understand her family." "There's nothing to understand," Claudia snapped, joining us on the lawn. "Except that you can't seem to accept that you're not wanted here." Camila looked between us, her face hardening with resolve. She unzipped her backpack and pulled out the envelope. "I found out why you really hate Grandma," she said, her voice trembling but determined. "It's not because she abandoned us. It's because she knew things you didn't want her to know." Eduardo's face paled as he stared at the old envelope. "What is that? What have you been telling her?" he demanded, turning to me. "The truth," I said simply. "Give me that." Eduardo reached for the letter, but Camila stepped back. "No," she said, firmly. "This was written by Grandpa Roberto. It was meant for me." "You had no right," Claudia hissed at me, her perfect composure finally cracking. "No right to interfere in our family." "I am this family," I replied, the years of hurt finally finding voice. "I helped build everything you now claim as yours, Eduardo. I loved you from the moment your mother placed you in my arms, and I never stopped, even when you pushed me away." Eduardo froze, his expression shifting from anger to confusion. "What are you talking about? When my mother placed me—" "Read it." Camila thrust the letter toward him. "Read what Grandpa wrote before he died." The neighborhood seemed to hold its breath as Eduardo took the letter with unsteady hands. Claudia moved closer, reading over his shoulder, her face draining of color as the words sank in. "This isn't true," Eduardo whispered, looking up at me. "This can't be true." "It is," I said gently. "Your biological mother was my sister Maria. She loved you, but she was too ill to care for you. Roberto and I took you in when you were 3 months old. We became your parents in every way that matters. Why didn't you tell me?" His voice cracked, decades of confidence suddenly stripped away. "We thought we were protecting you," I said. "We wanted you to feel secure, to never question your place in our family." "So I'm not even a real Hernandez," he said bitterly. "The vineyard, the family legacy, none of it was ever truly mine." "That's not true." I moved closer, daring to place my hand on his arm. "You were our son, Eduardo, our only child after we lost Elena. The vineyard has always been your birthright because we chose you. We loved you." He shook his head, backing away from my touch. Claudia snatched the letter from his hands, scanning it again with narrowed eyes. "This changes nothing," she insisted. Biological or not, Eduardo built that business into what it is today. Your husband's letter doesn't entitle you to anything. I never came back for the business, I said quietly. I came back for my family. Eduardo looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in years. Why reveal this now? After all this, time? Was it just to hurt me? No, I said, my heart breaking for the pain in his eyes. I kept the secret for over 30 years. I only revealed it because the lies about me, about why I left, had become too destructive. They were poisoning. Camila against me, just as they've poisoned this entire family. Camila stepped forward, pulling the sapphire brooch from her pocket. Grandpa wanted me to have this. He wanted us to know the truth, not to hurt anyone, but so we could heal. Eduardo stared at the brooch, recognition flickering in his eyes. I remember this. You used to wear it on special occasions. It's been in our family for generations, I explained. It was meant to pass to Elena, then to her daughter. But when we lost her, Roberto and I decided it would go to your daughter instead. A tear slipped down Eduardo's cheek, the first I'd seen since he was a young boy. I don't know what to believe anymore. Believe that you were loved, I said simply. By Roberto, by me, even by Maria, in her own way. That's the truth that matters most. The weeks that followed were difficult, painful, but necessary. Eduardo struggled with his identity, with the revelation that the parents he thought were his biological family had kept such a significant truth from him. Claudia remained defensive, protective of the life and status she'd built alongside him. But Camila became our bridge. She moved between our separate worlds with determination beyond her years, refusing to let the family fracture further. She brought Eduardo to my apartment one Sunday afternoon, his visit stiff and formal, but a start. Nonetheless, I'm not ready to forgive everything, he told me honestly. But Camila deserves to know her grandmother. It was a small opening, but enough. Over the following months, the walls between us slowly, painfully began to come down. Eduardo asked questions about Maria, about his early years, filling in the blanks of his history. I shared photographs I'd kept hidden away, stories I'd held close for decades. Claudia remained distant, but even she began to thaw slightly when she saw how important these reconnections were to Camila. 6 months after the revelation, I received an invitation that brought tears to my eyes, a family dinner at Eduardo and Claudia's home. I arrived nervously, a bottle of wine from the original vineyard stock in hand. The evening wasn't perfect. Conversations sometimes stalled, old tensions occasionally resurfaced. But when Camila appeared wearing the sapphire brooch with her dinner dress, Eduardo's expression softened as he looked between his daughter and me. She looks like Elena when she wears it, he said quietly as we stood together in the kitchen afterward. Yes, I agreed, allowing the bittersweet memory. But she has your determination. He smiled slightly. And your stubbornness. A family trait, I acknowledged, biological or not. As we rejoined the others in the dining room, I watched Camila explaining the brooch's history to Claudia, who was listening with genuine interest for perhaps the first time. The truth hadn't magically healed all wounds or erased the painful years of separation. Eduardo still struggled with his identity, Claudia still harbored suspicions about my intentions, and I still carried the hurt of having been pushed away from the family I loved. But around that table, something broken had begun to mend. The circle of family, imperfect, complicated but real, was slowly being restored. When Camila caught my eye across the table and smiled, her hand unconsciously rising to touch the sapphire at her throat, I knew that Roberto's final gift had served its purpose, not as a weapon of revenge, but as a key to unlock the truth that had kept us all prisoners for far too long. Family, I realized, watching my son's profile as he laughed at something Camila said, isn't defined by blood or by perfect harmony. It's defined by the choice to keep trying, to keep loving, even when the path back to each other seems impossibly long. And sometimes, that choice alone is enough to find our way home.